Hello once again. The EFF will be commemorating its 8th anniversary of the formation of the July 22nd movement. South Africa's third biggest political formation is the fastest growing movement in the country. The firebrand EFF leader Julius Malema says it broke his heart to see former President Jacob Zuma going to jail, a man Malema once led the charge for his removal as head of state and calling for his arrest.
The July 26 movement is celebrating their 8th birthday on Monday. They have grown to be one of the fastest growing political formations in the country. After the 2019 general elections, they went back to parliament with a battalion of 44 members of parliament. Julius Malema leads this movement after his expulsion from the African National Congress. We're going to bring in now in this sit down with the leader of the economic freedom fighters, Mr. Julius Malema. Mr. Malema, what a road it's been for the EFF since your formative stages. In the first general election that you participated in, you went to parliament with just 20 members of parliament. Subsequently, you're now sitting at 44 members, and you are also an official opposition in a number of provinces. How has this road been for you as the leader of the EFF and the organization?
Well, thank you very much for having us. It has been a very interesting journey. We've been learning. We didn't know a lot of things, but we are more than happy today because we have performed beyond the expectations of the people of South Africa and our own expectation, because we thought this movement is going to grow slowly. It is an idea that we'll have to sell it to our people over a period of time, but we're very fortunate that our people bought into the idea much more earlier, and today we can account for almost 2 million voters from nothing, without a backing of any country, without the backing of any department or well-established companies, or without the backing of any former president or ministers or premiers. We were just a group of young people in the main who started from nowhere.
Mr. Malema, when you formed the EFF, many people had written you off. Many had said you are done and buried politically. How has the rise of the EFF, and especially knowing what you suffered on a personal and financial basis, how has this growth of this formation been fulfilling to you?
Well, you must never write people off, especially when they are still alive. You can write a person off and you are being told the following day that actually this person got an accident 7 years ago and RAF is only paying now. And the person just emerges from nowhere. Or someone died and has written these people as beneficiaries in some policy, and before you know it, they are successful. So you don't do that with living human beings. So we all knew, even at the time, that they were wrong to bury us alive. Some carried coffins, literally, and they marched on the streets of my township and went to put a coffin on the gate of my grandmother to celebrate my downfall and written me off from political life of South Africa. So it was a premature sort of. So we knew that we had something to contribute. We stayed in the ANC and fought to remain in the ANC because we thought it was the only alternative to fight for economic freedom in our lifetime. And when we got expelled, we were left with no option but to find an alternative, to continue to agitate and fight for the land, for free education, for nationalization, and that's exactly what we did.
When you look at the trajectory that the EFF, I saw a post of Advocate Moses Sikhakhane wishing you a happy birthday, where he basically says you've shaken the very foundations of this political and economic landscape of this country, which in the longest of time has been against the black majority. Looking at the current contemporary politics within South Africa and the African continent, how would you describe the downtrodden and what they are going through at this point in time?
Well, things are not looking good for the downtrodden, for the poor of the poorest. Is becoming hard and hard every day. And the most unfortunate thing is that you've got a regime which is more lenient and more favorable to the former colonizers and the former oppressors. And they do so because they assumed power through the sponsorship of those people. So those who sponsor you own you, and that's what is exactly happening now. So the people of South Africa, the poor people of South Africa, the African people in particular, have been written off completely. They've been rejected, and when articulations are being made, they are not being considered. They do not occupy anyone's mind, especially those who are at the top of our leadership today in South Africa. So it could have been worse if there was no EFF, because the EFF is able to push doors and make them to sometimes go a bit softer and slow on issues that involve poor people. But in the absence of the EFF, I can tell you now, they will be doing as they wish, because even in the presence of the EFF, they still are doing wrong things. But it is very easy than what could have happened if the EFF was not there.
Lord lead, EFF, Lord lead.
You raised this issue of the current regime being too lenient and too close to the previous colonizers of this country. You've got the cell phone number of the incumbent. Last I checked, where you used to reside in Hyde Park, it's just about 3 kilometers from the residence of the particular individual who occupies the union buildings. Have you raised these issues with him?
Well, he knows where I stand. I've raised issues with him sharply. We have that type of a relationship where we tell each other issues honestly, and we continue to do that. But you should know that where he comes from is too late in the day for him to make a U-turn. He has had a relationship with the establishment for a very long time. I mean, he served in the foundations of these people in the 70s when people were running away and going underground and doing all manner of things. He has been part of them. He worked for the Oppenheimers, he stayed with the Minels. So it's going to be very difficult to change an old person like that. The ANC made a horrible, terrible mistake, which they will live to regret for many years, because the guy just pleases the former oppressor.
As the EFF, you were willing to give him a chance. I remember after he was inaugurated, you stood up and said, Mr. President, you've been elected. We are willing to give you a chance unless you prove us otherwise. We will do to you what we did to former President Zuma. Has the camel's back finally broken?
Well, we are not there yet, but we're almost there. I stood up and gave him advice. One of those advices was that he must listen to his party, the collective. He must stick to the resolutions of his party's conference, and he should not have a separate kitchen cabinet where matters are discussed with Rupert, and then Rupert's input overrules both the NEC and the cabinet. We were talking to someone who is completely compromised, and we think that it's a matter of time before we declare war against him. We have seen how he has treated our people. We have seen how he has reacted in the recent activities. And the reaction is of a person who's not interested to change and be on the side of the weak, because he likes more powerful people than the weak, and that's what is going to compromise him.
When you look at the events of the past 2 weeks, particularly the massacre in Phoenix, because it is a massacre, as the EFF, the government's response, what's your view and your standpoint from the response that they've given this particular massacre and the lack of highlighting of it? I know a guy from Bamshela, where I'm from, who was literally butchered. 2 guys from Gomapumulo were buried over the weekend. As the EFF, how are you going to assist those particular families and raise this issue that our government is seemingly sweeping under the carpet?
Well, we are going to help those families to find justice, and we will not rest until these people who committed this massacre are held accountable. We have in the past helped those that were victims of the state unfairly so, but in this instance, there were Indian thugs who were running amok in Phoenix, and the government is sweeping these matters under the carpet, as you are saying, because we've seen the rate of food, but we've not seen the rate of guns, which were in full display, faces shown of people carrying guns and threatening to kill the bastards, referring to African masses. One of them is an ANC councillor, a noticeable figure. The ANC had just won that ward from the DA, and that's why they are reluctant to move in a manner that will show decisive leadership. We have assigned our structures to follow up with each and every individual family, and we must take the matters up and make sure that justice is served. We did the same with COSA here in Alexander and ensured that the state is held accountable. We'll do the same in Phoenix.
You've continuously raised issues of a superiority complex that those whom are from the Indian community, not all, some may have, and how they treat the black people of KwaZulu-Natal and eThekwini in particular. Are you vindicated by the events of the past weekend?
Absolutely. And to say some will be distorting the fact, it's a majority. It's a very few individual Indians who don't look down at African people, in particular in KwaZulu-Natal. And these events have vindicated us. And they try by all means, when you raise these issues, to suppress you and to project you as a racist, to hide their own dislike of Africans. They treat Africans worse than what whites will do our African and Indian brothers and sisters in eThekwini and KwaZulu-Natal. So, and it will not stop now until there is leadership in KwaZulu-Natal that doesn't take money from Indians, that is not in bed with Indians, that takes a deliberate decision not to prefer Indians over Africans when it comes to economic opportunities. Because that's what makes the Indian arrogance in Natal. One of the Indian colleagues was saying to me, but those Phoenix Indians were saying they were acting in self-defense. What is self-defense in stopping a car driven by a woman who is well-dressed in her makeups? You can see she has not been running around. Professional African lady. Take her out of her car and ban it. What do you call that? Can't be self-defense. That is thuggerism. That is hatred of Africans by in majority of Indians in KwaZulu-Natal. Their superiority is perpetuated by their preference over Africans when it comes to economic opportunities. And KwaZulu-Natal must stop. The ANC allows these Indians in KZN to behave in a manner they're behaving because the leadership of the ANC is in bed with them and allows them to look down at African people.
How do we change this alleged superiority complex that the majority of the Indians in KwaZulu-Natal, which you say, have and undermine black people? How do you reconcile the two races?
We need to change property ownership. The patterns of property ownership must change. Without land, without banks, without mines, without economic opportunities being placed in the hands of Africans, they will continue to look the same. You don't think that Indians have got high regard for Patrice Motsepe. Majority of them will not even recognize him as he walks past. They will treat him the same way they treat any other African from KwaMashu. They were all the same before them. Why? Because we are all not owning the means of production. So we need to change the demand for the land, the demand for economic freedom is for demand for dignity. All of this will come to an end when the dignity of Africans is restored. And that dignity is ownership of the means of production in South Africa. Nobody is interested in that. The ANC is not interested in that. It's interested in tenders, and of the tenders, they're interested in getting 10% of those tenders. We're not going anywhere. The real freedom and respect is property. I can tell you, my brother, even in your own and our own African families, when we've got bereavement, the uncle who has nothing has got very little input to make. Every time he tries to speak during preparations of a funeral or an event, he's been told to keep quiet because people are talking. They'll just say, "Silo, keep quiet. Can't you hear people are talking?" Because he's got no property, he's got no money, therefore he's got no dignity, and his views matters not. So we must change that in this material world where a dignity of a person depends on what you possess as an individual. We are landless, and therefore we are not worthy of their respect.
After this short ad break, Mr. Malema, I want to pick up this point of how do we actually methodologically restore the dignity of the African black child beyond political slogans and resolutions.
All right, let's take a short break. More on the July 26th movement coming up after the break. Sabukele Maseko continues his conversation with EFF leader Julius Malema.